June 1933, 7 visions given to Brother Branham. March 1963, 7 seals preached. March 1993, 5th trumpet opened. Very strange. 30 years from 1933, when the 7 visions were given to Brother Branham. That's 30 years to 1963, March, when he preached the 7 seals. 30 years to March 1993, a huge major snowstorm, storm of the century. 30 years between each one of those. The 7th seal is the 7 trumpets. And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half hour. And I saw the 7 angels stood before God, and to them were given the 7 trumpets. Why do I believe that the 7 seals are the 7 trumpets? Well, for one reason I believe it is because it says that. It says that there was silence for the space of a half hour, okay? And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about the space of a half hour. And then it immediately says, and I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them was given the 7 trumpets. Okay. And basically, I believe that the 7 trumpets are the 7 seals. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that the 7 seal is the 7 trumpets? I believe that the 7 seal is the 7 trumpets, or the revealing of the 7 trumpets. I believe what the 7 trumpets were under the 7th seal, that they were revealed. And I'm going to go into a story why I believe that.
Here at Obergatlinburg, we usually celebrate having a good snow. This makes for wonderful skiing conditions, and to be completely honest, it's good for our business. However, not every snowstorm is a welcome sight in the Smoky Mountains. 25 years ago today, we experienced a snowstorm like we had never seen. Hurricane-force winds swept through the area, knocking down many trees and creating power outages for up to 2 weeks in some parts of Gatlinburg, Sevierville, and Pigeon Forge.
In the winter of 1992, I rode this tram at Gatlinburg, Tennessee, up to the ski resort, Obergatlinburg. I worked there over the Christmas of 1992, and I think I worked there maybe 2 or 3 months. So I rode this tram. I wasn't working there at the time. I had just quit before this storm come. Storm of the century. On March 12th through the 14th, 1993, a massive storm system bore down on nearly half of the U.S. population, causing approximately $5.5 billion in damages. $9.8 billion in 2019 dollars. America's storm of the century, as it would become to be known, swept from the deep south all the way to the east coast. March 12th to the 14th, 1993. This is an important part of what I'm going to be talking about, is this date, March 1993. And why I believe that the 7th seal is the revealing of the 7 trumpets.
Several days before, I was noticing what looked almost like a hurricane on the weather charts developing out of the Caribbean, moving to the Gulf of Mexico. And I said, well, if this Arctic air that's coming down should ever meet that, it would be catastrophic here. I told my news director, I said, this could be unbelievable. This could be biblical proportions. And he goes, what do you mean by that? I said, well, 30 inches of snow is not out of the question in North Georgia. He said, you can't go out in the air and say that.
That means a tremendous amount of wind, snow, blizzard warnings in effect from Washington to Boston right now. Perhaps one of the great storms of the century is now underway.
This winter storm wasn't just a normal winter storm. This winter storm was considered the storm of the century, the winter storm of the century, that there was no winter storms in 100 years in that century that was worse than this.
Welcome back to the storms of the century. We're counting down the Weather Channel's experts' choices for the top 5 storms of the century. So far, number 5 is the 1938 New England hurricane, and number 4 is the Galveston hurricane of 100 years ago. Now we move on to storm number 3. It's not a hurricane. Instead, it's a winter storm that produced tornadoes and paralyzed the eastern seaboard. Let's spend a few seconds listening as our experts discuss the importance of the superstorm of 1993.
When you look at this storm, the number 3 storm of the century, there was something different than in this storm than there was in the 5 top storms, okay, of the century. The first 2, they were hurricanes, okay. Number 5 was a hurricane, number 4 was a hurricane, number 2 was a hurricane, and number 1 was tornadoes that went through in 1974. This is the only snowstorm, okay, that was considered in the top 5 storms of the century. So this was not a normal snowstorm. This is a very unusual event that happened. So you might say, what does a snowstorm or a winter storm in 1993 that devastated a big part of the country, what does this have to do with the 7 trumpets? What does it have to do with the 7th seal? The 7th seal. Okay, what does this have to do with it? That's what I want to go in and tell the story about. I had come home from work and just laying on the bed, it was warm. It was sometime in the spring of 93. And I was laying on the bed and I was thinking about religion stuff, religious Bible stuff, and like I always do. And I started thinking, something come into my mind, and I started thinking about the hellfire and brimstone preachers. I was in Tennessee at the time, and that was kind of a place for hellfire and brimstone preachers. And I had been visiting a Baptist church with a friend of mine. He'd asked me to go, but I was laying on the bed, and I was tired, and I was thinking about hellfire and brimstone preachers, when all of a sudden, the 5th trumpet started to open up to me, okay, and it said that these locusts were these hellfire and brimstone preachers. That's what they were. That's what these locusts were, with stings in their tails. And I'm thinking, whoa, wow, that's wild. I had studied the book of Revelations for many years, or had read it, and there's really hardly no way to studying it because it's just massive confusion. But I'd read it. I've always loved the book. And that's where it first started with me, that 5th trumpet. It was out for, it come out of the bottomless pit, and Brother Branham had said the bottomless pit was Catholicism, and I knew that's where Luther had come from, and I knew that, I went into the library and I started studying it, and I started to seeing that a lot of the priests were converted to Lutheranism under Martin Luther. And I tried to figure, how does this fit together? How does this, make sense? Because something had showed me that. And there were other things that had came to me at this period of time about Cain and the cherubs at the Garden of Eden, how that the cherubs at the Garden of Eden was actually the lineage of Cain, or the devil, or however you want to put it, hindering people from getting back in. And that tied in with Matthew 23, where the Pharisees shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for they won't go in themselves, and they hinder those that would. Because I thought to myself, I said, how can God, who doesn't have a will that any should perish, block his own children from getting back into the tree of life? Of course, you can go back into Revelations and tie it in there too. But I'm trying to stay on this subject. So that, the 5th trumpet was revealed to me. The 6th trumpet was revealed to me. What happened in the Garden of Eden and what was placed up there to keep the children from God from getting back in was revealed to me. And all these things that had been revealed to me when I was in Tennessee for that year and a half all started at that day. And I didn't realize it at the time. I started to studying some of the SEALs books to see what Brother Branham had said about this thing, to see if I could tie it in with what Brother Branham had said. And that's when I realized that the SEALs were preached in March of 1963. I said, wait a minute here. I said, this is very odd. All these things coming to me exactly 30 years, almost to the day or two, or to the week or so, from when Brother Branham had preached the 7 seals. He preached the 7 seals. He started it in the 18th, I think it was the first seal was preached, of 1993. On Friday, I believe it was Friday, March the 12th, I worked at a chalet. Me and my first wife, we worked at a chalet in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And it was nice out, and there was talk going around that a big storm was coming in. And they asked us if we would stay over because the mountain area there, we live way up in the mountains in the foothills, and they asked us if we would stay over, and in case we couldn't get back to work. So they'd give us a condo to stay in. So Saturday morning, on March 13th, that's when the storm hit. So, and we were stranded in Gatlinburg till the following Saturday. We were stranded there, which would have been the 20th of March of 1993. Then we got back to our home. And after that is when these things started to come to me. 30 years exactly from the time that Brother Branham preached the 7 seals. I do not understand this. I'm just giving you facts. What does it mean? What does this 30 years mean? Is there silence in heaven for a half hour? I don't know. I'm just giving facts. That's all I'm saying. This is what happened. I don't understand it, but I do understand that is when those trumpets, to me, started to open up. Now, I only got the 5th and 6th trumpet revealed to me till later on, a few years later, maybe 10, 15 years later. Then I seen the first seal, the first trumpet, what that meant. Whether this storm has anything to do with me, I find it very ironic that exactly 30 years from when Brother Branham started to preaching the 7 seals, that exactly 30 years, almost to the day, that a huge storm come in onto the country and just devastated the country. Never was there a storm a snowstorm like that recorded in that century. I find this very unusual, and I don't quite understand it. And whether it has anything to do with me, and whether it has anything to do with the trumpet that I believe was revealed to me right after this storm, that I don't know. But there is no way to deny that Brother Branham preached the 7 seals on the 18th weekend, the 18th in March 1993. There's no way to deny that, and there's no way to deny that in March the 13th that this huge winter storm came in exactly 30 years later. That is history. Now, this is what I would like to believe. I would like to believe that the devil put this storm out to stop, that God was going to start unfolding more of his word after the 30 years after Brother Branham had preached the seals, that he was going to start unfolding his word more. And that the devil always attacks and always tries to stop God from unfolding something. That's what I would like to believe.